Welcome to the Ack Attack podcast. As always, I'm your host, 3 squirrels in a trench coat, trying to get into an R-rated movie, Jay, and joined as always is my co-host, the chipmunk who stole my nuts many years ago, Z.
That's right. I'm Zach, and you're Jack, for the inaugural episode of the Ack Attack, which is a bit of a clever pun on our name.
Not really. It's
no,
just
it's not so
not so clever.
Hardly a pun, isn't it?
I would say so. Just barely qualifies as a
I
pun.
don't even know if it qualifies at all as a pun.
Something. It's certainly something, if nothing else.
So here in this beautiful June of 2021, got all manner of media to discuss, don't we?
That we've consumed. We've consumed so much media. Mostly we're going to start, and we're going to talk about the episodes of Loki we just finished watching.
That's right.
Episode 2, The Variant. Episode 1, if we really wanted to.
So we've watched episodes 1 and 2, Disney Plus Loki series. I'll say just to start, though, I didn't watch a lot of the trailers and whatnot going into Loki, because more and more I find myself not engaging with trailers, not consuming trailers as much, just because a lot of this stuff I'm
gonna do anyway.
Yeah, I'm already convinced to watch. I'm all aboard to consume, so I don't really need, because at this point the trailers almost do nothing but start to give away some of the stuff. So I guess I didn't realize how. I suppose I knew it was going to be oriented around the Time Variance Authority here, but I didn't know quite how heavy that was going to be. And they're really leaning well into the time travel stuff. Huh?
Yeah, I guess it's not really time travel in the traditional sense.
No, it's kind of weird.
It's more of like it's kind of like dimension hopping because they kind of exist outside of time.
Yeah. See, and this isn't traditionally Loki's domain necessarily.
No, he's more magic.
Like, the Time Variance Authority is, as I understand it, in the comics, most traditionally associated with the Fantastic Four, from what I understand.
Oh, really? I don't know a lot about that.
Yeah, I think the first appearance of the Time Variance Authority is in a Fantastic Four run. So this isn't really Loki's kind of thing. Obviously, he's more of like a magic-y fantasy character than he is a
science fiction.
Yeah, science fiction kind of slant. But
a Tales to Astonish, if you will.
Yeah, perhaps. But so he's really getting into it. But if anything, that's kind of a fun contrast.
Is that he's more magic based. He doesn't really understand. I guess as we said, the Asgardians are not really magic as much as they are just really advanced scientists.
Yeah,
as they've talked about in the MCU many times.
Yeah, in the MCU in particular, which I would see this is going off of, they aren't as heavy into the magic and whatnot. So I guess that sort of makes sense. Although he still obviously has magic. But yeah, it's a lot more science fiction than I was necessarily prepared for. That's a bad thing, but it's pretty hot concept.
Yeah, it gets kind of trippy. They've addressed it a couple times. Loki doesn't really understand how it works because he refers to them when they go to Pompeii in the second episode. Also, I guess I should mention spoilers.
Oh, yeah.
For literally
Absolutely
everything we're going to talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
If anyone's listening at this point, it's episode 1. I know we got tens of thousands of listeners right now. To you, our good friend Colin, listening to this, you know who you are. I'll leave this in because it'll be fun for future reference.
That's right.
A little shout out for him. What the fuck was I talking about?
I don't know, Pompeii, something.
Pompeii, yeah. When he goes to Pompeii, he tells them that they're from the future, but they're not really from the future because they don't exist, and they always exist.
I think what he's doing there, I think Loki is fishing for answer there. Like he's trying to figure out where they're from because earlier, obviously in the episode there, he was looking for the books and whatnot on the origins of it, and they went or the files, and she wouldn't let him take him. I think he's trying to get to the bottom of himself. He doesn't quite know, but yeah, I agree. From what we can see, it seems like the Time Variance Authority, like, they must exist outside of time.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to, because, like he said, the Timekeepers don't control what they do in the Time Variance Authority, which, in essence, means there's 2 timelines existing. There's the timeline in which the Time Variance Authority exists, and then the sacred time in which they control. So, because they don't go back in time through their own history, they only go back in the history below them. So there's, like, weird levels to this.
Yeah, I find it pretty hard to keep up with.
It really
in the first episode in particular, trying to wrap my head around it. And I think the real answer is it's one of those sort of time travel scenarios where you're not meant to obsess over the
finer details.
Yeah, exactly. Over the exact details of it. Because it seems the way they do it with those little devices they've got is that when they go into a timeline, they're essentially able to do just about anything they need to do to set it right as they see it. And then that little machine just puts it back like it should be.
Yeah, it just destroys it. Flips the branch, as it were.
But it is kind of confusing in the sense that the Loki show seems to make out that there's like one true timeline,
or one timeline that they've dictated,
that they're worrying about, that they're focusing on.
Yeah,
I suppose that could be because obviously the other MCU material is definitely like suggests that there's multiple timelines and they're okay with that.
Yeah.
So maybe you're right. Like maybe the Time Variance Authority has chosen one in particular that they're focused on to to make a certain way. Because that's essentially, and they didn't talk about it as much in the first episode, but they get into it with the second episode, is this idea that if this time variance authority exists, and they have this one very specific timeline, then there's almost no free will.
Yeah, there's absolutely no free will.
You're only allowed to do what they want you to do. And they get into this in the first episode with that
the little animation. Yeah, I was going to say.
Infographic.
Because they said that it just being as much as being late for work
will
set the
and it's not so much that they're worried about, like, saving the world, because obviously, as we saw in the second episode, they're content to let
apocalypse occur.
Yeah, dozens of apocalypses occur.
Because you almost have to let them occur.
Yeah. Well, right. They're clearly not, like, denizens of good or anything. They're not out to save people and set the world right. They just have one specific timeline that they think is the best one for
whatever reason.
Yeah, whatever reason that we are, as of yet, not really sure of, I guess.
Which I think is strange, because when they mentioned this last episode, when Mobius is talking to Loki, and Loki brings up, like, well, how does it end? Shouldn't you know? Because in essence, they should know, because it's time. Like, there's an end. So, like, how have they not figured out what the end is yet?
Right, because the time variance authority seems to exist, entirely outside of time. Like, they would have to for them to do what they do, right? In the second episode there, they start to get into the future, right? They go to the 2050 there, which is well beyond any other material in the MCU as of so far. And I think it'd be safe to assume that they can go much farther.
They can go thousands of years into the future.
And so I think you can, like, start to get into it and try to make sense of it all. Of like we were saying, that maybe it is that this is one timeline among many, and that's why the Time Variance Authority they have specific concern with this one, because they're just worried about preserving one, and then everything will kind of trickle down from that. They can let any number of timelines go to ruin
as long as
their
one
token timeline is good. And that would kind of be supported by, like, the stuff in Infinity War, right? That there's 13 million timelines that
14
million where the Avengers don't succeed, and only one timeline that at least that Doctor Strange saw
where they
were successful in defeating Thanos and bringing about what we would consider, at least, right, a good positive outcome to that. And that's kind of when, like I said, it's a little more high concept than I was expecting, and it really is hard for me to personally wrap my brain around, because you can start getting into, like, like you said, it's almost dimensional more than it is just straight up time travel.
That's more,
yeah. The idea of, like, multiple universe theory, just period, which is, like, if I don't know about you, but whenever I start thinking about that, it trips me out a little.
But
the idea that in any number of infinitesimally small decisions could create a branching timeline.
Well, it does create a branching timeline.
Would buy the theory, that some of which may, like, be imperceptibly
small,
different than our own, or, like, a butterfly effect type situation where even a small change could have large ramifications for whatever reason,
unknowably large
consequences. Or, like, some people don't subscribe to that at all with like the multiple universe theory, right? The idea that, like, because you might think, well, if there's infinite universes, why is there only one universe where the Avengers win?
Right.
There should be, by some estimations, an infinite
number where they
win and an infinite number where they lose, because that's infinity, right? But I've heard it described before as, like, there is technically, right, an infinite number of numbers between
there's different kinds of infinity,
like 1 and 2, because you can break them down infinitesimally small.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that means that you could go on for literally infinity and never get
to 2
any specific number in that bunch, because you could just go on forever.
You could in theory, you could write zeros forever and never actually increase by any metric, any noticeable metric.
Yeah,
because eventually numbers become so small they don't mean anything. That's why that's why you don't really go past the thousands place, 100,000th place. When you that small, what's even the difference? It's like a hair difference.
When you get into, like, real deep into numerical theory like that, numbers aren't necessarily, like, an inherent part of the universe or whatever. It's just a way that we
have decided to make sense of it.
I don't really remember exactly where I was going with this.
I don't know either. But I was going to say something about the infinite.
It's just the idea that there could be an infinite number of universes, but still only one that is exactly what they want. And I guess the question is, if this timeline that the Time Variance Authority is so
keen on keeping together,
protecting, if that is, say, the same one from the MCU thus far, right? Because if it is, like, that's got some interesting implications, doesn't it?
And they let certain things happen.
Yeah, that everything that's happened has happened because they allowed it to happen. Or disallowed it from something else from happening.
It must be building to something greater.
Or, like, what I was trying to get earlier, that is one way to look at it, I think, potentially. And I would suppose we're probably going to get some answers to this as this goes on, right?
That's something interesting that I was going to bring up about, because I know how, because in the MCU, they operate, because I know the DC universe and the MCU universe operate differently. Because the DC universe operates in like a brain function where there's like higher planes of existence on like different wavelengths. But the MCU timeline very much fits into the Loki way they do it, where there's branching paths and every decision branches. But obviously, as you think, well, there's infinite possibilities. What does it even matter if an infinite number of times the Avengers win, but there's an equal and infinite number of times that Thanos wins or Kang wins or whoever wins? Mm-hmm. But in the MCU, in the comics, there's the living tribunal who sees all reality and decides, and every time the villains win, he just destroys that reality. He only lets the good ones win because, good triumphs. And what's interesting about that, and where I'm going with this, is there's 3 time variance authorities, and the living tribunal has 3 faces, judge, jury, and executioner. So there's a very good chance, and I was thinking about this, that they may incorporate this character in the MCU in this way. That they may answer, or may very well be, the living tribunal, because they're deciding which reality gets to stay and how reality should go. Yeah.
Well, I like that. I think that could be. I think what I was getting at earlier is that at some point, perhaps it doesn't matter all that much. And like what I mean by that is that in the comics, right?
Right.
Like the comics, it's a much, like, obviously at this point, a much larger, like more fleshed out universe. But one of the things that's, like, obviously so cool about a Marvel Comics universe, or same goes for DC, but also one of the things that can be daunting, I think, as, like, potentially a new reader,
right,
is that there is so much going on in a world like the Marvel Comics, right?
Yeah, it's hard to keep up.
Where there's magic and sci-fi, and there's the
gods.
The Norse gods exist.
But also there's the living tribunal, and there's the Beyonders who exist beyond.
And there's all kind of alien races, and Doctor Strange is, magic is real.
Because his magic is not science. His very much magic. And there's different
real
realities.
There's different kinds of magic.
The nightmare, and there's hell, but it's also not, like, Mephisto's hell, and there's the hell of the Norse gods, and there's the hell, like,
there's
actual
like essentially a
hell.
Christian hell. Yeah, that's kind of like how Ghost Rider ties in, all that kind of stuff. And, like, at some point, I think that sort of the answer to, like, dealing with that is just that you don't.
Yeah.
Is that you kind of take, even though it is part of a curated larger universe that does mostly stick together and is cohesive, at some point you have to understand, I think, that not everything is gonna super mesh. That's not necessarily always a priority.
Yeah.
Is like an absolute adherence to continuity. And while the MCU is not actually obviously at that point yet where it's quite so large,
it's getting there.
It's getting there.
It's gonna be there. With these shows, it's kind of exponential.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Is that, like, something like a Loki is clearly an experiment. The series, I mean, is clearly a bit of an experiment, right? It's different from anything they've really done before, I would say. It's kind of unique in its tone, and again, like the sci-fi kind of concept it's wrestling with. And yeah, with so many shows, and they're still doing all the movies and stuff, and I think they're getting to a point where the MCU is so, like, fleshed out that they very well could.
Yeah,
they could be getting to a point where continuity is kind of second, and there is kind of stories that are almost off on the side.
Yeah, stories that don't really matter in the main line.
Because I think that if we were to say, to extrapolate from these, again, and for all we know, like, these stuff is going to be much more fleshed out and definitively answered in the coming episodes.
Right.
But I think if we were to take these first 2 episodes and try to extrapolate from that the existence of the Time Variance Authority means that everything that's happened in the MCU thus far has only happened because they allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
Obviously, that takes away a lot of the agency of all the characters, and that's sort of the
idea.
To tie to that.
Well, Loki's getting at.
Yeah, I think that's probably what the series is going to deal with, is that the Time Variance Authority is not, like, it seemed to be super good, right? If that really is what they're doing in taking people's agency, and yeah, like Loki addresses even in that second episode, that they seem to be, if it really is like they say it is, that they get to determine what is and is not the right timeline, and that any slight deviation is treated as a crime. Like, they've kind of stripped away free will to an extent, right?
I mean, probably not even to an extent. I think they just strip it all together.
Literally, right?
Just literally just not free will.
And I think the aesthetic, like, design of the Time Variance Authority is getting at that, like, between the fact that they're, like, this, this most, like, stereotypical, like, bureaucratic machine.
Yeah.
With all their, like, 50s era tech and stuff. And like the fact that their guards are kind of fascist looking.
Kind of riot gear.
Yeah, they're all like riot gear and
they just
scary
use kind of like
black.
billy clubs.
Yeah. I think maybe that's what it's getting at, is that, like,
This is not
they're
good
not the
thing.
good guy. Which is interesting because, like, that's going to mean Loki, like, going against them, I guess, is more of the hero. Which is
an interesting concept.
Because this Loki in particular has not yet gone through all, like, the character development that we get from Loki in, like, Ragnarok and Infinity War and stuff, right?
Right, yeah.
He kind of got, like, a fast-forward version in the first episode.
He just got a Cliff Notes?
When he watched the movies.
He's like, oh, I watched all the movies. Okay. He watched all his movies.
He sat down, he watched all the movies, like, you know, with the proper angles and everything.
He was like, oh, so that's how... See, what I thought was going to happen is that once he dies, the tape was going to just cut off because his life is over. But I guess it kind of doesn't really work for the character and the scene for just to him die, because you gotta see his brother like mourn his death, and it really shows a departure that his brother also, like, obviously Thor cares for him.
Right, because this is still like 2012 Loki.
Mean.
Crazy.
He's a bit of a dick.
Quite a dick, I would say. And where he goes from this in the normal timeline is that, like, you go into Thor the Dark World, where he's like, he goes a little crazy for a while, and then
I think it's mad his mom dies.
Yeah, and then he takes over Asgard by the end of that movie and stuff. Like, and so I think it makes sense that in that first episode, I personally liked, at least, that they just, they kind of sped up his character development, essentially, and just showed him all, like, hey, this is
how your life is.
This is how it's going to go.
How it's destined to be.
Because I thought maybe they were going to, like, dance around that for the whole series, like, kind of hide from him the fact that he was going to die. But obviously, in retrospect, like, it definitely makes more sense this way, especially for the motivations of the Time Variance Authority. Like, they don't really care about him. Like,
they're like, well, we're gonna use.
Yeah,
they don't.
so, like,
most of them don't even. Only Mobius really wants to use them.
Yeah.
So Mobius is like, well, I have to tell him everything.
Gotta bring him right up to speed.
Because I feel like that would be. I feel like that's used a lot in fiction. That, like, oh, I know, like, a terrible truth about you from the future, and I'm not gonna tell you until, like, a crucial emotional moment. And I feel like they'll just drag down the series. Like, I feel like it's better if they just go, all right, you die, and then do kind of like a different plot, because that, like, isn't really. That's just kind of dramatic irony that isn't really necessary, I feel.
I agree. I think that's why I expected it as well, and I was a little pleasantly surprised that they just got that out of the way. Like, because that was gonna be hanging over the show the whole time otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Like, when it was first announced, the whole Loki show, however many years ago, I remember that was kind of like the discussion.
It's like, what the hell's gonna happen?
It's like, this is Loki devoid of all the character development, and they obviously could have just ran with that.
Yeah.
But I do also like that they were just like, well, we kind of have to bring him up to speed in a way that's also, going to be, it's relevant to his character and the story.
Yeah, it was interesting how I thought about the Loki show, because I remember when I first heard about it, and I was like, a Loki show? Like, he's dead. Like, what are they going to do? Mm-hmm. And I was pleasantly surprised when I did the Time Variance Authority, because previously, I had never heard of the Time Variance Authority, because, like you said, Marvel Comics is so fucking big, you're not going to find everything. Like, unless you really scour, like, you're not going to catch everything.
Right.
And I don't have that kind of time. I have other things to consume and obsess over.
And I think it is, like, I do think they're relatively obscure. They're not a big, player necessarily.
I really wish they called him Mobius,
okay,
because that's his name. It's Mobius and Mobius.
Wow.
It's like Major from Catch-22.
Can't win them all, can you?
Can't win them all, but, I mean, I guess what's interesting is that I don't know, like, I don't know what they're classified as, because they're not humans. They're not.
Well, so
people.
Yeah, that's what I mean when it really gets kind of screwy. And again, hopefully we'll, like, start to learn some of that, like, what the Time Variance Authority really is.
Yeah, what their true nature.
Because it's pretty freaky, this idea that they were supposedly, everyone who works there was just invented. Just made from, Because
if you think about it, all of those guys are, in a sense, more powerful than even Thanos himself, because they exist they can travel outside the timeline.
Yeah, this unrestricted access to time travel that they have obviously makes them. And again, like you said, it's not even just one time that they seem to be jumping around. Like,
they go everywhere.
They had obviously in that scene in the first episode that kind of like made Loki realize really what he was dealing with, right? Where there was a ton of Infinity Stones there. Like, if they have that kind of unrequited access to something like that, they really are, like...
And they don't even care about them.
And they don't,
Because what use do they have of them? They only really need the time. Like, they can do everything the Infinity Stones can do, except for, like, control minds and control souls, but they don't really need to do that. Do they even have souls? Like, there's a lot of questions.
It really is. And, like, again...
Are they living beings?
If they did have any goals beyond like just keeping their timeline, they obviously could easily achieve them because of how powerful they really are, which is again I think why you sort of have to look at this show in a vacuum, because otherwise you're getting into like a why didn't they call the Eagles thing from Lord of the Ring? Because you're just like, the Time Variance Authority, it seems like, could have solved every problem that's ever appeared in the Marvel Universe. And again, I think that's why you have to like kind of compartmentalize this, because like you said, we were talking about earlier, there is so many forces that are at work in every iteration of the Marvel Universe. The comics and stuff expand so big as to like the powers that are at play, where in every story you could just say, why does an X, Y, or Z omni-powerful character just show up
and fix all the
problems, fix things? And so really what you have to do is you kind of have to say, well, you have to take what you're given with that stuff, and that's why the comics work, is that when you pick up an individual comic issue, even though you know that the Time Variance Authority is out there, or Doctor Strange is out there,
or Scarlet Witch, or
any number of omni-powerful characters are out there who could solve the problem of this particular issue, you have to say, well, what is this story telling? Yeah. What does this hero do? Like, what are these specific characters doing? What are they working with? Because otherwise, when you get a universe as expansive as the Marvel Universe, and again, as we're getting here, the MCU, you could just, there is like 36, different solutions to any given problem if you chose to go that way. But so, I think you can't really look at it. And
especially, like I was saying with Living Tribunal, once you know about him, like, if shit really hits the fan, there's a guy at the top who just hits the kill switch. In a sense, if you think about it too much, nothing really matters. Like, if things get too bad, they just scrap it and just go to one that works.
So I think you can't really think about it that way.
You can't really put too much thought into it, but these fucking normies do it.
Yeah.
What's all this? What's all this then, hey?
But overall, I'm enjoying Loki so far. Wait, so how do you rank it amongst the Disney Plus shows in particular?
So far, I'd probably say it was the best.
Yeah, really?
I was the most excited. Like, when you're saying, I meant to say this earlier when we talk about trailers, but I'll just say it now. Is that I had the opposite thing with the trailers, is because I watched that Loki trailer probably 5 or 6 times.
Right.
Probably almost 10 times. Because it was just really intriguing because it was so different and just so kind of high concept. Because they just kind of get wacky. Like, they can just do all the wacky comic book shit that I kind of like. They're like with the Time Vision 30 and like traveling through time, and Loki does like more Asgardian magic. There's stuff that as a comic book knowledge of, I don't read them a ton, but I kind of know that I enjoy. What Zack Snyder tries to do, but he doesn't, and I hate him. But that's unrelated to this conversation. It's for another time, listeners. But yeah, I think it's the best so far. I think that so far my ranking would just be this and then WandaVision. Pretty close. I'd say I really liked WandaVision. And I gotta say Winter Soldier a little bit further down. Captain America Winter Soldier, whichever you say it. Because like, that one was okay, but I definitely saw like some faults there. And it kind of meanders a little bit in the middle. And at the end, Sam just gives like kind of talks at everybody. It's like, hey, stop being bad. It's like, I get what that's why you're doing, but like, I don't know, kind of a little bit too much for my taste, I think.
Yeah,
I did enjoy it. It's not, none of these are bad. I don't want to get that misconstrued.
They're all good. And like, if anything, that's sort of just a testament to the sort of, and this is weird to say, right? That like sort of golden age of like superhero content, which is kind of funny to say, because you'd ask somebody like 5 years ago if we would still in 2021 be extended into this golden age, like, because people for probably the better part of a decade at this point, since like Iron Man first exploded and sort of kind of revitalized it, people have been saying that the superhero bubble is going to burst, and it may very well yet. But I think, if anything, that shows just how spoiled for choice we are between Disney Plus shows and
the Marvel movies
that are coming out, and if it's the DC stuff, it's a bit of a mixed bag. But that and like,
I mean, even Netflix, sort of, The Boys, stuff Invincible.
These third-party stuff. Exactly. Jupiter's Legacy. That's it. Yeah,
Isn't Ascending the one with Mila Kunis?
Yeah, that's that bad movie.
Where she's like a reincarnation of like a Saturn lady. Kind of like the Eternals, actually.
But yeah.
It's weird.
Invincible, like you said in The Boys, like there's all this stuff that's kind of experimental a little bit. And
more of deconstruction.
Yeah.
Just like that movie Brightside, where that evil Superman kid.
Brightburn? Is that what
Brightburn. Brightside.
Yeah, like
Mr. Brightburn.
So I think I totally agree with you. I don't know. Maybe give it a little longer. I'm not going to say it couldn't for me, but I think for right now, I think of the 3, WandaVision's going to be on top for me, and I agree that Falcon and the Winter Soldier is probably the weakest. But again, that's not to say it's bad.
It's just say that it's just the weakest, which is just a testament to how good the shows are.
That's what I'm saying, and I think that we're going to see that. Like WandaVision, particularly, I don't think the show has yet, for me, reached the heights that WandaVision did. But again, it's still obviously much earlier.
Yeah.
But also, I've noticed, like personally at least, that I guess you said there's like less hype around individual episodes.
Yeah.
And I noticed the same sort of phenomenon definitely with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, with the Star Wars Disney Plus shows as well, is that there's kind of diminishing returns on how much energy people seem to be able to muster for this stuff. And I think WandaVision in particular, being that it was the first MCU content in over a year, right? I think that probably worked in its favor, and being the first MCU show, and being
the first Marvel thing.
Like I said, the first MCU thing in a while, but at the time, certainly like probably the most experimental thing
Marvel
they've done in the MCU up until that point, and to now be only maybe surpassed by Loki itself here. But I think, and I don't think it's any fault to the shows of themselves, but I think as they go on, they're just going to be a little more commonplace, and I just don't think they're going to be as much excitement around each and every one. And again, that's not anyone's fault, and it's kind of a shame, because the discussion around WandaVision was
insane.
Yeah, and I think part of that's probably because there was like that mystery sort of element. That now this has more of that, whereas Falcon and the Winter Soldier had none very little of that.
I think that's a big reason why Falcon and Winter Soldier didn't have as well-warmed reception, because WandaVision, I remember a friend of mine expressed this to me, and it was a very good point he made, just about how, because every episode of WandaVision, you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I don't know what's happening, and I just want to find out.
They kind of would answer a couple questions, and
then raise for every 3 questions it answered, there were 6 more around the corner.
Don't get me wrong. I don't think everything should do that, because that's not...
Then it just gets boring.
Yeah, that's not good either.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being a Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is just a pretty straightforward, like that was a grounded story, which is what it should be, right? That's what the Captain America movies in general have been in the MCU, right? Like they all fill their own niche, the different sort of like sectors of the Marvel universe, right? Like you had your Iron Man movies were kind of this like
sci-fi,
but like a harder, like a more grounded sci-fi, like techie and like this industrial kind of espionage and stuff like that. And then Thor obviously is like your fantasy realm, and Captain America has been the most grounded. So obviously the show that is ostensibly the Captain America show,
and you got the Guardians who are more cosmic.
Yeah, cosmic in space. That's like the more like straight down the middle sci-fi
kind of more kind of wacky, I'd say, because they kind of do whatever they want because it's exactly, because it's just space. Fucking anything's out there.
Right. So, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with the fact that Falcon and the Winter Soldier didn't have all these cosmic questions or these, like, really high-concept sci-fi ideas, because that's not what it should have been. And again, I think it's just because we're so spoiled for choice now that, people just can't muster the same enthusiasm for each and every one. And again, like I said, I think I noticed it for the Star Wars shows as well. The Mandalorian, in particular.
People love that show.
That has a ton of... And I would bet that it will again when it comes back. So maybe it is going to be
certain years, shows. Right? Is Book of Boba Fett this year?
It's supposed to be, I think, early next year. I think it's supposed to lead. Yeah, I think it's supposed to be pretty close together. And again, I think they're going to get to a... it seems like we're going to get to a tempo here with the Disney Plus stuff that it's going to be almost unrelenting.
Because what is it? This ends, and then Black Widow comes out for it, and then What If comes out, and then after What If, it's Shang-Chi, and then... Somewhere in there's Miss Marvel, The Eternals,
Hawkeye,
and then Spider-Man.
What If?
I did that one.
So, and that's not to count Star Wars stuff. I think starting next year is when all those Star Wars shows they announced are also going to start kicking off. It seems like Disney Plus essentially, and this makes sense, right? When you look at something like Netflix, they have a ton of originals where they seem to be releasing literally probably something new almost every week.
Yeah.
And
they never like doing season 2s though. They notoriously
they get up to season 2 or 3, but it's almost unheard of for a Netflix thing to get a season 4.
They've recently been canceling a lot season 2 because
they ran the math.
What is it? There was one show I really liked. It was I can't believe this is happening or what the fuck's going on, or some teen Netflix show that was pretty good. Where a girl's got like psychic powers and she's got to like figure them out.
See, and maybe Disney Plus has found a way around that, in that they seem to be more inclined to do these one-off event series that only have only ever designed to have one season from the ground up.
Which I think for these Marvel shows is better, because I feel like these shows are standalone, but they're very clearly stories that build into the movies. Like, it's stories they couldn't do as movies. Because I do not think they're ever going to make another season of Falcon and the Soldier because he's Captain America. Like, because he is a flagship Marvel character. Like, Sam Wilson is now Captain America. He will just have Captain America.
I think it's been discussed and, like, flown around, but yeah, I could see it going either way. I know they've talked about season 2. They've also talked about, obviously, that Captain America 4 movie that's going to be starring him and presumably, the Winter Soldier and probably the whole crew. They obviously left off, like, cliffhangers at the end of that. So the question, I guess, is just whether or not those are going to be picked up by the next Captain America movie or by some second season of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? But yeah, it seems to me like these series are, much more tied in than they've had any before with like the ABC series or anything, or the Netflix series that they had before, that they are serving almost as just like long form movies,
which is almost better because they can do more. They got more they can accomplish.
Well, yeah, they can kind of do more than they could in a traditional movie. I guess is all I'm saying. Like it's you get 6, 7, 8 hours in a TV series as opposed to two and a half. But also they don't feel pressured clearly to like drag a show out to multiple seasons, which I think those are both like I think it's good. I think that the MCU is in a place where they obviously trust the creators behind it to do pretty much whatever they think.
I mean, that shit prints money. They can fucking do whatever they want.
Yeah, and again,
people hated Captain Marvel. She made $1 billion. It doesn't. It's not going to affect them.
Exactly. The bubble again has yet to burst. Whether it may yet or not is one thing. But
I think
for the time being,
for the bubble, I think for now, I feel like I always did this because I remember when Endgame came and they were like, "Oh, we're gonna have a whole Phase 4." I was like, do I really care about Phase 4? And then I ended up caring because
they've already got a lot of people.
Little
back
soy
on board,
boy, fucking
that's right.
Audio medium. I did the soy boy face. If you know that,
but
Colin.
Yeah, I agree. Like people did say that. Like it seems on one hand as if people are essentially rooting for like the MCU to fail because it's. People like doing that, right?
Because
no one likes it just admitting that a successful thing is good and successful.
No, because they can't. Because they're like, oh, it's too much. It's too much. It's too much. Like what?
So
then don't watch it.
Yeah, people have been on that.
Just not watch
people have been on that for a while, but yeah, it's still going strong as of now. And again, yeah, after Endgame, people are like, oh, well, this is definitely it, right? Yeah. And no one's gonna care. But it seems to be doing good now. Like with these MCU shows in particular, everyone's back on board. I would say, if they lost anyone to begin with.
Oh yeah,
I think. It seems what I was getting at before is that it seems like Disney Plus is trying to match that sort of tempo of a Netflix with the amount of original content they're putting out. It's just that with Disney Plus, their original, obviously the properties that they have access to make original content of is
the most lucrative properties
probably
ever.
Between the MCU and
Star Wars, they would just need those two.
They have the most lucrative properties ever.
And if the news is to be believed, and they purchase DC and its comic subsidiary, fucking, I personally cannot wait. I mean, they got Fox, which is a discussion
about. They're talking about alien shows, like Aliens, like James Cameron's Aliens and stuff. And,
a show about that?
And all kind of content that they could be putting out.
Yeah, they could do whatever.
They really if they put as much money into their original properties as Netflix seems to, they could be putting out very high quality, high production value shows. But yeah, again, on these properties that everyone already cares about. They already have a built-in audience. You're not trying to convince someone to pick up The Boys or Invincible or, Jupiter's Legacy or whatever. You're just convincing someone to continue watching a Star Wars show.
Yeah.
The brand recognition is so much more powerful that they would almost be fools to not. Like, it's from the outside, you might think, wow, they must be putting a lot of money into all these shows, right? Doing this many shows and stuff. But yeah, it's got to be doing well for them. I mean, like, Disney Plus is already one of the most, only in the second, third year, whatever, of its existence. It's like far exceeding expectations.
Yeah, it's. I think it only is rivaled by Netflix, but that's been around for a decade. Been around longer than as long as the Marvel movies at least. And it's only going to get more popular because they're just going to put all the movies on there. What I was saying about this bubble, I just want to circle back to that, is that, I mean, like I said, I think, people aren't going to be as interested. But I'm thinking this now. I'll probably put my foot in my mouth when these movies, because they've already planned out the next Phase 4 and I think 5, or this is just 4. Because the last one they've said is Blade, I think, is the furthest, or no, Fantastic Four is the furthest one ahead.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is there a definitive statement on which one of those is first, or
which Blade or Fantastic Four? Yeah. I think
they're both well out. Those are both two ones that are far out enough. They don't have release dates.
Yeah,
or we don't know hardly
I've heard that they got the woman who wrote the HBO Watchmen series. Mm-hmm. They got her. I believe she's still on there to write Blade. So I believe they have not gotten a writer for Fantastic Four, and they've cast that guy from the Green Book, and he's in Moonlight. I don't know what Mahershala Ali. Thank you. He's already cast as Blade, and they haven't cast anyone for Fantastic Four. So clearly they're far enough along.
That's what you think. John Krasinski's waiting in the wings, man. Him and Emily Blunt, they've already been cast.
I think they're it'd be foolish. I
don't know if it'd be foolish.
Not foolish.
But I do like that people have apparently been pestering the two of them.
Which is no good. I agree. Which is the problem, right? Because sometimes it works. I remember the interview with the woman who's Monica Rambeau in WandaVision, that somebody said that, hey, she should be Monica Rambeau 6 years ago, and then she got a call from Marvel. So I think that stuff is cool. But when they're like, are you in it? Are you in it?
That happened with
Are you in Emily Blunt? And they're like, who gives... No.
And Ahsoka. Yeah, sometimes it can work in that favor, like with Rosario Dawson and Ahsoka, where somebody puts it out and it gets enough traction. And if obviously the actor is on board and the creatives behind the project are on board, like, that can be a cool thing that works out. But yeah, just incessantly bugging them is kind of lame.
Bugging them is no good.
I will say, I think if anything would get it, it would be, like, just overdoing it, right? Just an oversaturation. Yeah. And that's what's been being said for literally years now. It's like, they're oversaturated. They're doing too many of these.
Way too many. No one's going to want to listen to them.
I think there is something to be said about that. Except, I think when you get oversaturated, it's not that everyone stops seeing anything. I think it's just that they only start seeing
things they want to see.
The things they want to see that are, whatever, the good things. And I think that could potentially be where Marvel could be almost doing themselves a disservice. Obviously, it remains to be seen. And I think this year in particular is not going to be the time for it because, like, obviously mitigating circumstances. I think people are hungering to just go back to the movies and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
just to have that experience again.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if all their movies this year did
$1 billion.
Maybe even above. Like, I wouldn't. I would not be surprised. If this
especially the nature of them, because the 4 movies they're putting out this year are Black Widow, which is a movie people have been asking for forever, which I think is.
I will say, okay. So my thing about these, all the properties they have so far, not so far. I should say all the ones that are coming out this year. I think that this could potentially be, in a normal circumstance, like the weakest year that they've had as far as lineups.
Right.
As far as like name recognition, as far as like established properties, they're trying a lot of new stuff this year.
Because I've never heard of Shang-Chi. I don't know anything about the Eternals. I mean, you have read the Now Game and Run, yeah. Exactly, but I've never read anything. I'm probably not going to.
It doesn't seem to even be like tied super closely to that one in particular. It's certainly not a direct adaptation or anything.
Yeah, it's like more of its own story.
So yeah, I would say like if all these movies came out when they were supposed to, like last year, beginning of this year, and there wasn't this pandemic that disrupted stuff, and again, I think people are hungering for it. I think there could have genuinely been a bit of fatigue coming off of Endgame, which was obviously the biggest one by far, the whole MCU, but also in a lot of ways felt like a sort of culmination to it, to then come off of that and go into Black Widow, a character who
had
died in the previous movie. This is like a weird, like a prequel situation, and I suppose, not putting it super, you never know what they do with these series. Like, I suppose there is some chance that there's some shenanigans in the Black Widow movie that could have her come back in some way, but I don't know if I would certainly bet on it. So I think that could have lost people, right? Saying, well, why do I want to go see this movie? The character's already dead. And like you said, you have Shang-Chi, who's a character who doesn't have a ton of name recognition.
Yeah.
And the Eternals, who another one, like, that's a bit out there as a property-wise.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's basically...
I think it wasn't that the like film industry as a whole was doing too many superhero movies. I think you could make the argument that Marvel themselves
are doing too many superheroes,
which is too many at once. And again, it wasn't necessarily their most like lucrative properties. They're coming off of, again, a very big win, but like, a lot of people did see that as a bit of a culmination where they weren't necessarily super hankering for more. Especially,
I was in the same boat.
No, now that Iron Man's gone and Captain America's gone,
and Thor's kind of off with the Guardians, like everything's kind of separating.
Again, not to say anything against these movies. I'm sure they'll all be good. I'm going to see them all anyways. I would have always seen them regardless, and I'm sure they're going to be good. I mean, the way they're talking about the Eternals in particular.
They're hyping up the Eternals. I mean, they want to give it to the Oscars.
God King Kevin Feige is really...
God Emperor Kevin Feige in his great chair.
Master of creation. He's really hyping that one up.
I mean, the director has won Oscars. So, like, if it doesn't win an Oscar, I think... maybe it'll shut those goddamn film nerds up because they're like...
I don't know if it'll let it happen. It's not how the Academy rolls.
Kevin Feige's got a lot of sway in Hollywood these days.
He must.
I will say, like... He's a big man on campus around there these days.
The thing is...
I don't know why I say that. I don't live in Hollywood.
There's a lot of successful filmmakers who've done MCU stuff. But when you venture into whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it that, like, the popcorn... amusement park kind of
fucking Martin Scorsese. I love his movies, but goddamn, he could be a fucking old man about it.
People have these preconceived notions of it, not to do that. I understand that these isn't necessarily the peak of cinema.
Yeah,
that's not what it's supposed to be. But to act like it's totally devoid of
any value,
any artistic merit, or like any heart, or that these stories are not just the cinematic equivalent of fireworks shows. They do have substance to them, I think. Yeah. Again, I don't want to go full around and try to tell you how these are, like fine cinema. But they have substance. And I think substance comparable to other stuff that's been the Oscars.
Yeah, 100%.
If you, again, like you said, if you look at the filmmakers behind them.
They're acclaimed filmmakers.
Acclaimed, right? Jon Favreau, didn't he win Best Picture for Chef?
He won something. Chef was well received.
Taika Waititi did well with Jojo Rabbit. Like Jojo
Rabbit. He did well with What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People.
Yeah, you're right.
He's got a great sizzle. I mean, he thought it was going to be a career ender.
Are filmmakers who clearly know what they're doing, and so I think it's weird to assume that as soon as they step into
these Marvel movies,
yeah, which again, you can't deny they have more mass appeal, and that is what they're for. But to act like they leave, everything at the door, and they leave all their artistic, their own personal artistic desires and their ideas, and just make absolute fluff. I think it's not accurate either.
They just, I mean, mostly I think these people are just mad who make these artsy film directors. I mean, nobody wants to watch a black and white French film with a bunch of people in berets smoking cigarettes and watching a steak rot.
Potentially, that's even
nobody wants to watch that.
Again, I know that these aren't. I just want to keep saying it because I know anyone who listens to this, potential to make people angry.
If anyone gets episode 1,
anyone make it angry. But the thing is, like you said, maybe people are angry because yes, it's not reaching the absolute heights that cinema can reach. But again, it does have substance, and it does have heart sometimes, and they have meaning, while also being entertaining.
Yeah.
And they're not just these boring high concept artsy slog fests that often dominate the
Academy
Oscars,
Awards
that no one actually watches or has heard of, other than in the context of, hey, these are the movies that are going to do well at the Oscars. We should go,
watch them just so we know what the fuck's going on.
That seemingly newish trend of, hey, let's watch all the movies that
are going to be in the Oscars
that were nominated for Best Picture because we haven't seen any of them yet because they're movies that no one's heard of or been interested in.
Yeah,
rant. I hate the Academy Awards.
They're really
silly. I don't know what they're for anymore.
They're just for actors to give each other big fucking awards and stuff. We're already at 50 minutes.
Are we?
Yeah, we can
talk about Loki. I don't know how. I could Ack Attack you.
Okay. Well, Ack Attack.
All right, Ack Attack. So I watched The Quiet Place Part 2.
Oh, we should probably before we do that, we just said Ack Attack the first episode with no previous context. That's the thing we're going to try to do, listeners. And by listeners, I mean Colin.
We're getting too
rambly or off topic, or not really saying anything new. We're going to just try to say Ack Attack to keep it fresh.
We've given each other the express permission to Ack Attack each other to,
just keep it going.
Get us on court to switch topics if we feel a topic's going.
Because I don't know if you keep track of this, but we talked about the extended Marvel movies for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes,
something like that. We'll see how much of that makes it in.
See, probably all of it. It's the first episode. Who the fuck's gonna listen? I'm not gonna cut for content in the first episode. Are you fucking crazy?
So yeah,
I'll cut this out. My little rant as I keep talking and talking and talking and talking. Am I clipping? I don't think I'm clipping. I'm actually really clipping bad. Oh shit. Probably. Oh shit. I'm gonna cut all this out too.
But yeah.
Anyway, Ack Attack. What's
going? Because we named the show Ack Attack, so we thought. Now, again, I don't know if we'll be any good at this because we're traditionally not good at keeping each other in check. If anything, we feed off each other's
endless cycle.
But we'll try it for the sake of brevity and
for the sake of you, dear listeners.
That's right,
dear listener, right now.
Yeah,
maybe two if we put
some content.
Yeah.
So I saw A Quiet Place Part 2.
I did not. I've not seen the first one.
The first one either.
Did you watch the first one?
Yeah, no, I did.
Oh, okay. Well,
you do need to. I would say.
So you've watched it for both of us because I'm not gonna fucking watch them.
Anyone out there, you do need to watch the first one. It's not the type of series where you can just not. It's
every series is like that if you try hard enough.
It's not even just like a. It's called The Quiet Place Part 2, and it truly functions as a second part of a larger whole.
Not to cut you off, but I'm going to cut you off. Did you see they already greenlit third one?
Yes.
Third one.
Yes, I think
a threequel?
I think the third one was probably a given going into the second one. I think the first one was successful enough that they had those. They also have spin-offs in the same kind of universe lineup, but it seems that these three are going to serve as three parts of a whole. The way that they there's kind of cliffhangers. The cliffhanger thing of the first one is not super. It's not. I would say the one at the end of the second one is larger.
Also, spoilers for this as well.
Yeah,
just want to
spoilers in case. I'll try not to go heavy just because you haven't seen it, so there's not much to be gained. But
yeah, I'm not going to gain it.
The first one has a bit of a cliffhanger, but it's kind of the type of thing where if it didn't get a follow up, you wouldn't necessarily be what's going to happen kind of thing.
Yeah, but I would say you wouldn't be hankering for it.
Yeah, I would say the second one much more so. And again, like you said, the third one is greenlit, so it's all going to work together. But I just think they're good. I'll tell you out there, they are interesting and worth watching. They're not. I don't think they're overly scary. I know they they're understood to be horror movies, but they're almost more of
a thriller. Perhaps?
Yeah, kind of a thriller and this survival sort of thing. It's almost like a soft horror of a zombie apocalypse kind of content, which is It's not always about being scared the whole time.
It's just about the aftermath.
Yeah, it's about, like,
it.
it's a post-apocalyptic type scenario. It's cool seeing the way that they survive in the world, given the specific circumstances of the monsters, because, they're, like, hairy, right?
Yeah.
They got very cute.
So are they actually just aliens?
So the second movie gets into that a little more. I think it's implied there to be aliens. The question, I suppose, and it's the type of thing where I don't think the series itself needs an answer to this. Like, that's not what these movies are about.
Right.
It's kind of like The Walking Dead, where it's not the type of show where
you need to know exactly
where the heroes, their goal is to get to the bottom of it and figure it out and find a cure. Like, that's not what this is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about people trying to live.
Do they find a cure in The Walking Dead?
No.
Oh. That's not good. Anyway.
No. So, in the second one, though, in particular, you see because you don't get a big sense in the first one of how things start, whereas you do get that in the second movie. You see, like, the day 0 of it happening, or day 1, whatever it happening. And it appears to be, like I said, it's one of the things where I don't think it's going to be definitively answered, but it's either some kind of just, like, meteorite that's got them, or it could as very well be, like, a deliberate thing, a bomb or something, I don't know. Like, some different alien force is weaponizing them, like they're xenomorphs or something.
Because they don't seem to be they seem to be very animalistic from what I've seen.
Yeah, they're not super advanced, so, like, it doesn't seem that they have come on, like they've mastered space travel or something, interstellar travel to get here. It does seem like if they got here, it was either an accident or like they're deliberately using as like a blunt weapon,
as a bioweapon to kind of keep the planet intact without blowing it up, but kind of
like xenomorphs to kill everything alive without destroying a planet,
but getting rid of all the resources that would.
But again, I don't think that's what this is about. And particular relevance to us is that we live in the Western New York area, and that's where they filmed a lot of this stuff. It's just cool to see.
Yeah, it's cool to see places
It's never really gotten into in either of the movies.
That's not by an anchor bar?
Where it takes place. That's not, like, emphasized. Although, I've read that if the setting is meant, you're supposed to understand that it is meant to be upstate New York. Like I always say, that's a pretty big area.
It's all of New York.
Yeah, that people don't give a lot of credit to.
Because fucking... not in a rant I want to get into. That's another 50-minute rant I could rant about how much I hate people from the city. If you're listening from the city, you're the ones I like. But anyone else who doesn't listen...
People think of New York as like a monolith.
Yeah, just like, it's just that fucking city.
As in the city.
The city. I hate that.
It's a very big state. And a lot of it is actually quite rural.
Yeah.
As rural as, like, any... I think that's, like, the breakdown of most states is that...
It's the city.
Dense population centers, but most of the pure land mass...
It's just rural.
It's rural areas that need to be supporting that. Like, that's how civilizations work.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works. Because you think of most states, you think of, Pennsylvania is just Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, but there's a lot between those. Those states are on the opposite ends of those states. Yeah. Like, there's a lot between.
So they filmed all over the place to create, like, a composite, right? Which is most movies work out. I
would say.
So it's not necessarily one. I don't think it's meant to be any of the single places they filmed in. And the second movie in particular does some weird stuff with geography, where I think they really start to kind of take artistic license with places and stuff, where they're just creating things. But yeah, it's cool. Again, to me personally, none of it stands out as being from, like, upstate New York. That's why I said the movies themselves do not go out of their way to, like, hit you over the head with it, which I think is not a bad thing. It could just as easily be any small town across the country, pretty much. Yeah,
and within a certain area, it's not gonna be some small town in the west.
No, probably not.
Probably like the northeast or the south or the south.
The weather and stuff do suggest a certain type, but no, it's cool. Said if you are in, like, the West New York, Buffalo area, there is, like, some
recognizable landmarks.
Yeah, locations of particular. But again, a lot of it is just small towns, which are not unique to here.
Everyone's got a small town, right? Everyone's got a small town somewhere.
It's cool that they filmed him here. John Krasinski himself set foot in.
He was in Hunting Range.
Yes, he was.
I could find him and lick him.
He was in Trackable Range.
Find him and his wife.
Yeah.
Maybe they're two kids.
All the actors, really. Presumably the crew as well.
I can hunt them all, but there's not really much for their bounties. If I hunt John Krasinski, I've hunted one of the greatest actors of our time.
He was the most valuable of them for certain.
He is. Emily Blunt's pretty good. I think Emily Blunt's probably a better actor than he is.
He might be.
Because she does more dramatic roles.
I would say so.
Because she was in Edge of Tomorrow, great movie. Love that movie. Good. She's in Mary Poppins, did not see that movie. Not really for me, I think. But if you want to, listeners, email us. Colin, if you want us to listen to it, you're our only listener.
Talk in depth about the return of Mary Poppins?
Yes. Probably not, though.
It's on Disney Plus.
We could watch it. Literally anything. We could watch that squirrel thing on Disney Plus. Ulysses and a girl.
Yeah.
With Ben Schwartz.
That's a thing. That exists.
Not really for me.
Do you want to Ack Attack on anything else? I got a couple things.
What do you got?
May as well. You want to talk about War of the Bounty Hunters?
Ack Attack.
Ack Attack?
What's the next one?
Right past it. Got the bad
He's got an iPad here, listeners. Well, I don't know about any of this. I didn't watch the Bad Batch episode, and we're at like an hour, so probably call it right here.
You do that. All right. Well, then we may as well talk about War of the Bounty Hunters, I think.
All right, we'll talk about a little bit.
There's not much to it. There's one thing in particular I want to get, because I know you'd be interested.
All right, I didn't know if you were going to go in depth.
I actually haven't even read it yet, and it's also just getting started. But in one of the early issues... No, it's one of the Marvel Comics Star Wars crossover events, right?
Oh, that's pretty cool.
They've done a couple of these where they all cross over. Now, in the past, like last year, they switched over where since 2015, when they rebooted the Marvel Comics at Star Wars, right? They had been running until last year, so about 5 years. The main Star Wars run had run unbroken. The Dr. Aphra one had been going for 2 or 3 or 4 years of that. The Darth Vader has had like a couple, 3 or 4 series at this point. But the Star Wars one in particular was one unbroken line that has been releasing monthly since February or whatever of 2015. It had been running from the timeline it was taking place in was between episode 4 and 5, right? They switched over finally to now it's between 5 and 6, so it's obviously like a different dynamic. Luke's reeling a bit. Han Solo's gone. Yeah, so there's obviously everyone's dealing with the aftermath of.
Where does it say?
Nope. The Empire Strikes Back.
Jeez,
and so.
Not that I said that.
And so, in Legends, this story was dealt with in the multimedia event Shadows of the Empire. Right. Which was a simultaneously released
pachinko machine in Japan.
There probably was a pachinko machine because there was just about everything else. There was a significant toy line, a novel, a video game, a comic adaptation, and actually a soundtrack. A full soundtrack.
A soundtrack?
Yeah. So they say, I've never listened to the soundtrack, so I can't say. I've read the book. The only thing I've really have any experience with, to be honest, is the book. I've not, and from what I understand, they all tell different sort of perspectives on the same story. Right. And it's about the time between episode 5 and 6 and trying to get Han Solo back. Now, obviously,
we know
how that goes.
We don't get it back till they get to Jabba's palace.
When Shadows of the Empire is released, as well as this current sort of version of it, which is War of the Bounty Hunters, we obviously knew the outcome, but it was still interesting. And they say that, just fun fact here, the Shadows of the Empire multimedia event there was George Lucas testing the waters a little to see if there was demand for the prequels. At that point, he had decided he wanted to get working on them, but he wanted to make sure that people would still be interested. So he said,
"Boy, was he wrong."
We'll do a soft.
Well, he was right, but they didn't
he was right.
He was right, but he was wrong.
So he did a soft run where he's like, "All right, we'll do everything that would be tied in to a Star Wars movie release,
right?
Except the movie, right? Because all the prequels got video game adaptations and comic adaptations and
toy lines
and novelizations and toy lines. So he's like, if this is successful, then we can have a pretty good chance that the movies will be successful.
Right.
And so that's just kind of what this is. I won't get into like how Shadows of the Empire goes, but that's the same kind of storyline, which is about how Boba Fett's got Han Solo and everyone else wants him. That's why it's the War of the Bounty Hunters, right? Yeah. He's got the most valuable bounty in the galaxy at the time, and
everybody else wants to claim it.
This again is in Legends. This was part of it. Is that all the other bounty hunters, particularly the ones from
the 5th movie
from Empire Strikes Back? Yeah, that main crew. Do you know?
Revenge of the Sith.
No.
There's Lizard Man.
Yeah.
There's
okay, so that's
Robot
Bosk.
McGee. I knew his name was Bosk. I knew that.
You probably know the robot.
There's
you
Bandage
can get close.
Boy. It's like I something, right?
Well, he's similar to the one in The Mandalorian.
I don't remember his name.
So he's IG. So the one in Mandalorian's IG-11. Yeah. He's IG-88.
Oh,
Bandage Boy. Yeah, you're right.
Benjamin,
that's Dengar.
And then there's Boba Fett. It's 4
Boba
of them,
Fett. Right? No, there's 2 more. You're missing out 2. Oh, see, this is a shame, Jack, because this is the heart of my topic here.
Who the hell are the other 2?
So the other 2, the oft forgotten, the least significant, unfortunately, of them, but I think they deserve.
What is it? Cure cancer? What is he saying?
What's
the matter?
No, because they're good. Good on them. Listen.
I guess good on they hunt people for a living. Good on them, I guess.
The two,
is that what you're perpetuating?
The 2 oft-forgotten members of those 6 bounty hunters are Zuckuss and 4LOM.
His name is fucking Zuckuss?
His name is Zuckuss. What is he? He's got big bug eyes, and his friend is 4LOM, who is a C-3PO-esque protocol droid body with the Bugman head on top.
Gross.
Yeah,
very
he's no
gross.
good looking. And so in Legends, Boba Fett killed he killed IG-88 because IG-88 was trying to get it from him. You also fight IG-88 in that Shadows of the Empire video game. It's the whole thing. There's multiple IGs because he's just a robot. It's the whole thing. They take over the Death Star. It's not really relevant to this. But in this new version, in War of the Bounty Hunters, on the cover, unfortunately, Boba Fett is toting around the decapitated head of 4LOM, which is a bit of a shame.
That's a shame.
That was really the core of my topic. I thought you'd be distraught as I am, but
I'm not.
I
hope he kills Zuckus.
Almost no reaction.
I hope he kills Zuckus.
Come on.
I don't.
Can't
It's so dumb.
No,
his name is fucking Zuckus.
Oh yeah,
That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
Is that dumber than Bosk or Dengar?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Bosk is bearable.
Zuckus much dumber than Bosk?
Yeah, because there's no CEO that's called the Bosk. They call Mark Zuckerberg the Zuck. So Zuckus just reminds me of Mark
Zuckus
Zuckerberg.
is older. Zuckus may be older than Mark Zuckerberg himself.
I would say so.
When was he born?
2004?
No, I don't think that's right, but...
1974? I think I'm just going on fours at this point.
We could spin off into a larger discussion about the droid naming conventions of stars if you want.
We can't do that right now. We can do that next episode.
4LOM, listen.
I want to Ack Attack that. We're going to save that because it's an hour and 5 minutes, and it's our first episode, and no one will want to listen if it's an hour of us talking about Marvel.
You don't think that our wonderful listeners
right now
want to listen to me get into the finer minutia of Star Wars droid naming conventions?
You know, if we get an email about it, I'll let you do it. So I think that's going to be it for our first episode of the Ack Attack with J and Z. Thank you so much for listening, if you're listening at all. Thanks, Colin. I know you're listening. Or maybe you're not.
We appreciate you, buddy.
We appreciate you a lot, buddy. Anybody else? Thanks for coming along.
Tell us what
you want to talk about. You can email us at ackattackjaz, that's ackattackjazz@gmail.com. Email us questions, comments, concerns, jokes, recipes.
Try to be too mean.
Anecdotes. If you're mean, I'll cry on the podcast. And maybe
if you have some genuine productive criticism,
yeah,
I would like to hear it.
If you have, I'm not very good. I've never edited a podcast. I'll be straight up front. So if you have any editing tips or videos you want to send me, that's fine. If you say, hey, fuckhead, learn how to edit, I mean, I'll take it with a grain of salt because I don't know how to edit.
We're going to read it.
We're going to read it.
We're going to have precious few
emails. So
we're going to cherish some, but if it's mean, I'll be sad.
I'll be sad. I'll cry. I'll do the credits right now. This podcast was created by myself, Jack. I won't tell my last name because that's weird. And my good friend, Zach. We are J and Z, of course.
Yeah, I've been Zach.
This episode was produced by us, created by us, written by
us,
or executive producers. We did craft services.
We can just say we're the only two people involved.
You know what? I'm gonna do this later. I'm gonna delete this, and no one's ever gonna hear this. I'm gonna do it later. Thanks again for listening. Have a good night.